"Your wife is still alive," the boy whispered, trembling. In that single sentence, the billionaire's world shattered. Every assumption, every strategy, every ounce of control he thought he had. Within hours, his private security teams were mobilized. Investigators were on the move, and a shadowy trail of secrets began to unravel. But who is the boy, and how could he possibly know the truth? The billionaire sat in his glass-walled office overlooking the city skyline, a place that reflected both his power and isolation. Every decision he had ever made had been calculated, every investment meticulously chosen, every relationship carefully managed. To the outside world, he had everything: a thriving empire, a life of luxury, and a beautiful wife who had once been the center of his universe. Yet, despite the wealth and influence, there had been a void. For months, his wife had been missing under mysterious circumstances. Official reports had gone cold. The police had exhausted leads. Friends whispered theories, journalists speculated, but none offered answers that satisfied him. The billionaire, accustomed to controlling every aspect of his life, felt the frustrating sting of helplessness. Late nights in the office had become his norm. Surrounded by the hum of servers and the glow of monitors tracking markets and news feeds, he reviewed every file related to her disappearance. There were surveillance reports, witness statements, travel logs, but no sign of the woman he loved. And yet, somewhere in the shadows, he knew there was a truth hidden beyond the evidence, something no amount of money or influence had unearthed. His employees had grown used to his obsessive routines. Some admired his determination, others feared it. He rarely trusted anyone completely, keeping his inner thoughts locked away, the loss of his wife being the one fracture he never revealed. Yet he could feel it, the gnawing sensation that life was dangling on the edge of a secret too dangerous to ignore. Then came the moment that would shatter everything. A young boy appeared at the gates of his estate. Dirty, anxious, and strangely insistent, he asked to speak to the billionaire alone. Guards hesitated. He was no ordinary messenger, and yet there was something in his eyes, a desperate honesty, that made even seasoned security officers pause. The billionaire, curious but wary, allowed the boy in. He expected a wild story, a mistaken identity, maybe even a prank. What he did not expect was the chilling sentence that would turn his world upside down. "Your wife is still alive." The words hung in the air like a guillotine, sharp and undeniable. For a moment, the billionaire's mind refused to process them. Every scenario he had imagined in the past months, every possibility he had considered, crumbled instantly. Alive? How could that be possible after all the evidence, all the silence? He stared at the boy, searching for deception, but found only fear and an unshakable truth that the boy carried like a fragile flame. In that instant, the billionaire knew that his life was about to change forever. The boy's eyes were wide, reflecting a mix of fear and urgency. He clutched a tattered notebook to his chest, as though it contained not just information, but proof of a truth that could not be ignored. The billionaire, normally composed and commanding, felt a strange unease creeping up his spine. This was no ordinary encounter. The boy was holding a key to a mystery that had haunted him for months. How do you know?" the billionaire asked, his voice steady but edged with tension. He had interrogated hundreds of sources before, spies, detectives, informants, but none had ever carried the weight of certainty this boy did. The boy swallowed hard, his voice trembling but firm. "I saw her. She's alive. They're keeping her hidden. I can show you where." A rush of disbelief collided with hope. His mind raced through possibilities, every conspiracy theory he had considered suddenly seeming plausible. Why had no one else seen her? Who was they? And most importantly, why had no one come forward until now? The billionaire leaned forward, studying the boy's face, searching for a hint of deceit. There was none, only fear, and a truth that demanded to be believed. Every instinct he had developed over decades screamed that this was real, that this was the moment he had been waiting for without even knowing it. "Why me?" he asked finally, his voice low. "Why come to me?" "Because no one else will listen. And because time is running out, the boy replied. His words were simple, but their gravity was undeniable. Something was at stake, something beyond mere survival. The boy's urgency was infectious, pulling the billionaire into a world he had long avoided, one of uncertainty, danger, and raw truth. In that moment, a plan began to form in the billionaire's mind. He was used to acting decisively, to controlling every element of a situation. And though this was unlike anything he had faced before, his resolve crystallized. He would find his wife. He would uncover the secrets that had kept her hidden, and no obstacle, no matter how dangerous, would stand his way. The boy opened his notebook, revealing hand-drawn maps, fragmented notes, and names that sent a chill down the billionaire's spine. Each page was a breadcrumb, a trail leading to a reality the billionaire could barely comprehend. It was enough to ignite action, enough to transform shock into strategy. As the billionaire reviewed the information, he realized this was more than a rescue. It was a reckoning. The forces that had orchestrated his wife's disappearance were still active, still dangerous, and now aware that he was on their trail. There would be no second chances. Every decision, every step, every calculated move would be crucial. The encounter with the boy ended with a promise. The billionaire would mobilize his resources, and the boy would guide him through the first steps of uncovering the truth. But beneath that promise was a stark realization. The journey ahead would challenge not only his wealth and power, but his understanding of reality itself. And so, the hunt began. The billionaire's mind raced, the initial shock fading in a sharp, cold focus. There was no time to hesitate. Every second mattered. Within moments, he summoned his private security chief, a seasoned former intelligence officer who had served him for over a decade. The chief arrived within minutes, briefed instantly on the encounter with the boy, and received the billionaire's terse, commanding orders. We move now. No mistakes. Plans were drafted on the spot. Surveillance footage from every possible source, airports, highways, city cameras, was to be pulled and analyzed. Private investigators, both in the city and overseas, were mobilized. Forensic experts were called in to examine old evidence with fresh eyes, looking for anything the authorities might have missed. Technology, drones, and cutting-edge tracking systems were deployed. Every asset at the billionaire's disposal became a tool in the hunt. Yet money and power could only take him so far. The boy's information became the cornerstone of the investigation. The billionaire studied the notebook meticulously, cross-referencing names, dates, and locations. Each clue pointed to a network of people operating in shadows, a labyrinth of secrets designed to obscure the truth. It was clear that finding his wife would not just be about locating a person. It would be about dismantling a carefully orchestrated web of deception. Meanwhile, the boy provided context. He revealed how he had come across this information, what he had witnessed, and why he had risked everything to speak up. His courage impressed the billionaire. His knowledge was invaluable. But the billionaire also recognized the danger the boy faced. Protecting him became an immediate priority. He assigned a trusted team to guard the boy, ensuring that his safety would never be compromised, even as the investigation escalated. As night fell over the city, the billionaire's mansion transformed into a command center. Maps, screens, and communication lines crisscrossed the main hall. Analysts worked tirelessly. Agents called in briefings, and every lead, no matter how small, was scrutinized. The atmosphere was electric with intensity. This was no ordinary search. It was a full-scale operation, a collision of power, determination, and the urgent desire to uncover the truth. Even as the investigation gained momentum, the billionaire wrestled with the emotional storm beneath the surface. The thought of his wife alive sparked hope, but also fear. What condition was she in? Who had orchestrated her disappearance? And most importantly, what lengths would he need to go to in order to bring her home safely? Each question added weight to the operation, fueling a relentless drive to succeed. By the end of the night, the first pieces of the puzzle began to emerge. Leads were prioritized, contacts were activated, and the billionaire, took a solitary moment to gaze at the skyline. The city lights blurred into a kaleidoscope of possibilities, each one carrying the potential for revelation or danger. One thing was certain. The journey ahead would be relentless, perilous, and impossible to predict. The hunt had begun, and nothing, not wealth, not power, not fear, would stop him from uncovering the truth. The sun had barely risen when the billionaire's mansion had already transformed into a hive of activity. Analysts huddled over large monitors, tracking signals, mapping patterns, and connecting dots that had long been ignored by conventional investigations. Private investigators scoured neighborhoods, questioning locals, and following every fragment of information the boy had provided. Every lead, no matter how minor, was treated as critical. The billionaire, ever methodical, oversaw every aspect personally. He reviewed surveillance footage, cross-referenced phone records, and monitored social media activity that might hint at his wife's location. Every anomaly, every whisper, and every shadow was a potential breakthrough. He instructed his teams to leave no stone unturned, insisting on accuracy, speed, and discretion. Mistakes were not an option. Meanwhile, the boy acted as a guide, walking the billionaire and his team through the cryptic details in his notebook. He identified key individuals, locations, and events that had previously escaped notice. With each revelation, the billionaire grew more determined and more cautious. Whoever had orchestrated his wife's disappearance had planned meticulously. Tracking them required patience, intelligence, and strategy, not brute force alone. Technology became an essential weapon in the hunt. Drones with thermal imaging swept abandoned warehouses. Encrypted communications were intercepted, and digital footprints were analyzed to predict the movements of those involved. For the billionaire, this was familiar territory. He had always relied on data and innovation to solve problems, but the stakes had never been higher. Each discovery came with a reminder. The longer his wife remained in hiding, the greater the danger. The first breakthrough arrived mid-morning. A surveillance camera from a nearby district had captured a figure resembling his wife in an unassuming neighborhood, a place no one would have expected. The footage was grainy, the surroundings ordinary, yet something in the way she moved confirmed to the billionaire what he had feared and hoped for simultaneously. She was alive. With adrenaline surging, he coordinated with local operatives, mapping a strategy to follow this lead without tipping off those who had hidden her. This was a delicate dance. Any misstep could cost crucial information, or worse, endanger his wife's life. As he studied the movements, he realized the scale of the conspiracy. It was more complex, more calculated, and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. Even as teams mobilized on the ground, the billionaire remained hyper-focused. Every detail mattered. The time of day, the presence of unknown vehicles, the smallest anomalies in behavior. He knew that patience and precision would be just as critical as speed. Every lead was a thread, and if pulled carefully, could unravel the entire network that had kept his wife captive. By evening, a preliminary map of connections and potential locations had emerged. The billionaire studied it intensely, recognizing patterns and making strategic decisions about where to send his teams next. It was only the beginning, but it was progress. He allowed himself a brief moment of grim satisfaction. For the first time in months, he had a concrete direction. The hunt had begun in earnest, and the first tangible clues were in his hands. As the investigation advanced, the billionaire quickly realized that finding his wife would not be a matter of simply following clues. It would mean confronting hidden enemies who were willing to protect their secrets at any cost. The leads he pursued began to intersect with dangerous individuals, shadowy figures who had orchestrated her disappearance, and networks that operated far beyond the reach of law enforcement. The first confrontation came unexpectedly. While surveilling a location identified by the boy, one of the billionaire's teams encountered an armed guard protecting a seemingly abandoned building. A brief but tense standoff ensued. The team had to think quickly, using both stealth and strategy to avoid tipping off the captors. Though no one was harmed, the encounter sent a clear message. Those involved were vigilant, ruthless, and capable of extreme measures to remain undetected. The billionaire himself rarely left his command center, but when he did, it was with careful precision. He began meeting with informants, leveraging old contacts from his business empire, and questioning anyone who could shed light on the network, keeping his wife hidden. Each conversation revealed pieces of a larger puzzle, an intricate web of corruption, deceit, and powerful allies who had a vested interest in keeping her captive. Meanwhile, the boy's role grew increasingly vital. He could identify subtle patterns, recognize individuals from his brief encounters, and point out locations that otherwise would have gone unnoticed. His insights often came at great personal risk, forcing the billionaire to balance urgency with caution. Protecting the boy became paramount, even as the investigation demanded swift, decisive action. Shocking revelations began to surface. Some of the people the billionaire had trusted, former employees, business partners, even close friends, had been manipulated or coerced into aiding the disappearance. Every discovery deepened the mystery. The motives behind the abduction were far more complex than a simple ransom. It was about power, influence, and secrets that someone was desperate to keep buried. Despite these dangers, the billionaire pressed forward. Surveillance data revealed clandestine movements at night, hidden safe houses, and coded messages that hinted at where his wife might be held. Each lead was carefully cross-referenced with the boy's notes, slowly building a clearer, but still incomplete, picture of the forces working against him. Even in moments of tension and fear, the billionaire's determination never wavered. The first brush with danger had only strengthened his resolve. He understood now that to find his wife, he would need to confront not only those who had taken her, but also the complex network of lies, betrayals, and hidden agendas that had orchestrated the entire ordeal. Every step forward was fraught with peril, yet each step also brought him closer to the truth he had been desperately seeking. By the end of Part 2, it was clear the investigation had evolved from a search for a missing woman into a battle against unseen adversaries, a battle where intelligence, courage, and strategy would determine whether he could finally bring his wife home. The billionaire had spent weeks meticulously piecing together the puzzle, following every lead and interrogating every contact the boy had pointed out. And then, finally, the investigation produced results that were both exhilarating and terrifying. Hidden safe houses were identified, coded messages decrypted, and the network of individuals responsible for his wife's disappearance began to unravel. One late night, a breakthrough arrived from an unexpected source, a former insider who had defected from the network. Their testimony revealed the full extent of the conspiracy. Powerful figures had orchestrated the disappearance, not for ransom, but to manipulate decisions that could affect wealth, power, and influence on a global scale. The billionaire realized the stakes were higher than he had imagined. This was not simply about rescuing his wife. It was about exposing a dangerous system that could threaten many lives, including his own. The boy provided critical details on the final location where his wife was likely being held. It was remote, heavily guarded, and protected by layers of surveillance and deception. Planning the rescue would require precision, coordination, and courage. One wrong move could jeopardize everything. The billionaire now faced a choice: act immediately and risk a direct confrontation, or gather more intel and plan a larger operation to ensure success. As he weighed his options, he reflected on what had brought him here. The shock of the revelation, the tension of the investigation, and the courage of a young boy had transformed his life. Every decision now carried weight far beyond personal stakes. It was about justice, protection, and reclaiming what had been taken. The billionaire realized that he could not rely solely on his wealth. Strategy, careful planning, and sheer determination would define the outcome. At the same time, the personal stakes could not be ignored. Thoughts of his wife, the life they shared, and the uncertainty of her condition fueled a mix of anxiety and determination. The billionaire's empire, his resources, and even his instincts, all honed over decades, were now tools in a deeply personal mission. Failure was not an option. In the early hours of the next day, the billionaire assembled his team, reviewing every detail, every contingency, and every potential threat. Plans were mapped, roles assigned, and the operation was ready to be executed. The young boy, who had started this chain of events with a simple truth, watched with quiet resolve. He knew the next steps would be dangerous, but also believed that this was the moment when hope could become reality. The chapter closes on a tense, dramatic note. The billionaire, armed with information, resources, and unwavering resolve, prepares to confront the hidden forces that have controlled his wife's fate. The operation ahead promises danger, revelation, and transformation, an intersection of personal stakes and monumental consequences. The stage is set. The hunt is about to culminate, and nothing will ever be the same again.